So, it's a Hanabi session. I'm chairing it, but James is going to do my timekeeping for me, very nice of him. And after that, I'll try to do it. Yes, so I'll start. So, most of my time today I'm going to spend talking about the game itself. And mostly because for these guys it saves them a whole bunch of effort. If you have to listen to the description of how the game plays 3 times in a row, you probably will also. So, Hanabi is a cooperative card game, which means you're all on the same team. There's no opponents here, you're basically playing against the deck itself, in a sense. The game also is playable by between 2 and 5 players, and there is quite a large variation here in the gameplay. The 3, 4 and 5 player versions of the game all play quite similarly in our experience, but at least for human play, and in the 2 player game it tends to evolve into a quite different game. I've got some really nice graphs to prove this. I haven't got with them today, but I can send them to you. Do you want them? The amount of communication in the game is strictly controlled by a token in the game called information tokens. Essentially, they limit what you can say and when. I'll talk about how those work in a second. And you also have these 3 life tokens, where if you lose them, the game's over. There's a caveat to that too, which is also fun. The deck itself contains 50 cards, and the objective is to play cards in order from each suit, from 1 to 5, so lowest value to highest. The deck itself, these 5 suits are red, blue, green, white, and yellow. If any of you download the framework, you may notice that one of those colours is not yellow. It's orange. Why? Because I built the framework on a tray without internet access. I did it from memory. It's an email and too late to change now, but essentially it doesn't change anything, so it's fine. The number of each card in the deck is different depending on its rank. So for each of those suits, there are 3 1s, there are 2, 2, 3 and 4s, and there's only 1 5. What this means is that for the 5s, you really have to look after them, because if you get rid of a 5, it's impossible to get a perfect score. There are some strategies that deliberately chuck away the 5s on the grounds for novice players. It's not particularly likely to be able to play them anyway. But if you want a perfect score, you basically have to guard these things very carefully. Whereas these things, you can be a bit more blasé until you lose one. Scoring, basically whatever you've got on the table that's been played correctly in the game is your score. You basically just sum up each of them. So if we successfully played all the way up to a red 5, a yellow 3, a green 1, a blue 4 and a white 2, our score would be 5 plus 3 plus 1 plus 4 plus 2, which provided my calculator work properly is 15. Right, so this is where the difference I mentioned earlier about the score of the lives comes in. In our framework, if you lose all of your lives, you get the score you've achieved up until that point. This is not always how rules are interpreted. There is another interpretation of this where you score 0 if you lose all your lives. It's not how I originally read the rules, but our framework can do both. There's an environment flag you set if you want to use that version of the game. But just so we're aware and we're all on the same page, if you lose all your lives in these competition results, you still get the score you achieved at that point. The reasons why it's up to that way, considering afterwards if you want to know why I've done it. The game itself, the Google DeepMind paper about Hanabi's got these wonderful graphics. I'm not that good. What I do have is a friend with a very nice digital camera and a light box. So this is one of my slides at 17 megabytes. So this is the tile-based version of Hanabi called Hanabi Deluxe. Essentially these are our cards, we can't see them. We can see the cards of every other player. These are our life tokens and information tokens at the side. And we can see the cards I've got there. So on your turn, what can you do? Well, you can play a card from your hand. If it's next in sequence, you place it on the table, you get a point. Yay. If it's not, you lose a life. You can discard a card from your hand, and that generates an information token, which is what you spend to tell you things. You start off with 8, but over the course of the game, you use them, this is how you get them back. Once it's discarded, that's it, it's out of the game, you can't get it back. So you have to be a bit careful making sure you don't discard any cards you need. You can also spend one of those information tokens to either point out all the cards that are given colour, so these are all of your red cards, or all the cards that are given value, also called rank, i.e. these are your 3s, or these are your 2s. Also worth noting, you can't discard cards if you've already got 8 information tokens. And there's another way of getting information tokens. If you complete a suit, i.e. you get to 5, you get a bonus information token if you haven't already got 8, which makes playing 5 just that little bit extra useful. So there are some rules for tell actions. First of all, you're not allowed to point out that you have nothing of a particular colour. So you can't say to a player, you have no red cards, or you have no 5s. You can't point out like partial sets. If they've actually got 3 ones, for example, you can't then say, that's a 1, and leave out a 1. You have to point out all of those. Basically, your totals must be complete. And finally, and this one, I don't know why, I get asked this whenever I show new people the game. Can I lie about what card someone's got? No, it's not, no. You have to be truthful. And the reason is because otherwise it makes the game a lot harder. Because, essentially, if I know that you're pointing out 1s, you're also telling me something else. You're telling me that any card that you don't point to is not a 1. So in this scenario, if I've got in my hand a red 1, a blue 1, a green 1, and a red 4, and someone says to me, these are your 1s, and points to 3 of my cards, now I know that these 3 cards are 1s, but I also know that this card is not a 1, which gives us a little piece of extra information. The AIs can make really good use of this. If you're a human, good luck trying to keep it in your head. After a couple of turns, it starts to get a bit complicated. For our framework, you can ask for this. What can you figure out based on what you've been told? From each player's perspective. Although that may not be complete because they may go to see cards that you can't, which gives them more information. So, the question, is that everything we're being told? So here, we're being told positive information, i.e. these are your 1s, also being told negative information, but is that all we're being told? Open question?
No, it's not all we're being told.
Okay, why's that?
Because there is an intention that based on the choice that doesn't choose to tell you that.
Exactly. So, no, because, exactly, you have this intent. The person who's telling you is not just telling you this thing randomly, you hope. They are telling you something on purpose. They're telling you something because they think it's going to be useful to you. And therefore, if I say to this person, this is your only 2, I'm not just telling you this card is 2, I'm telling you this thing is useful, you should probably play it. There's also some other different types of toggle people have developed, like hack guessing strategy that I'm not going to go into because it's complicated and slightly tricky. So essentially, you can assume that other players are acting with intent. If they're telling you cards, if they're telling you about cards, they're probably telling you about cards you either know about or you can get rid of. And if you can make assumptions about what they're telling you, why they're telling you it, then you can make a much stronger player. So if you've got rules, things like, I discard this card in my hand if I've not been told anything about it. You've also immediately got another way of being tellable. If this card is a card that you've had the longest, I know that, and you know nothing about it, and I tell you about it, it might not necessarily be playable, but you shouldn't chuck away that card. I'm trying to stop you from chucking it away. And likewise, in general, pointing out a single card to discard is a really bad idea because essentially you cost an information token and a move, which are limited in Hanabi. So, in general, if you're pointing out a single card, the person will probably try and tell you to play it. And then you have these really complicated rules. This is from a rule on board game called Finesse, which is actually 3 rules in our framework because of how complicated it is. But essentially, if I point out a card that isn't immediately playable to the player after you, then blindly play the card you picked up last turn because that's the card I want you to play, so that card is now playable. Which is not only a mouthful to say, it's a nightmare to code. But you can code it, and we have got it in the framework, and there are various rules like this that people come up with. I think this one's originally from Bridge, where the name comes from. Why do we care about this? Well, as human players, as humans, we're always reading about what other people are going to do. Often our agents don't do that. The only thing our agent cares about is the score. Well, if we can start incorporating this knowledge of how the other people in our games and in the world are working, if we can incorporate this modelling strategies into our agents, we might be able to create something slightly more human-like, which ultimately might be good for our games. If I'm playing a role-playing game, and all of a sudden, like the agent sitting around, yes, we should. We're going to stealth around this, and the agent runs in and goes, yeah, I'm going to pick up that loot. No, don't do that, please. Set up all the alarms and allow you to choose. So these strategies, although we're developing them for Hanabi, they may be applicable to other games. This is quite interesting, so I actually had a discussion literally 5 minutes ago with one of our students who was saying, hey, this would be really cool for something else I want to do. So, anyway, the competition itself, you all heard about this the other day, I'm not going to go through it in too much detail, but essentially, you're playing every variant of this. The game's the 2, the 3, the 4, and the 5-player game. For every deck ordering you encounter 250 deck orderings, and the order in which the players are in the matches are randomised. They're always fixed for a certain deck ordering and repeat, so you're playing in the same places, which is a bit fairer. And you get originally 40 milliseconds and then a second. Last year, 2 tracks, mirror and mix, which I talked about the other day, and learning, which is our new one, where you're basically playing with labelled agents, which is much more like how humans play. If I know I'm playing with James, or I know I'm playing with Rodrigo, I know how they play, I can tailor my strategy more. These are the agents from last year. These are both now in the paper. They were hidden, and they still are on the slides actually, but they are now, I made them public as part of the paper. So if you want to know what they were doing, have a look at the paper. This one, slightly more complicated because it's GA generated, so it's this long. I can give it to you if you want it, but it's not fun to read and it didn't fit on the pages. So 2018 results, similar before, but this you haven't. This is the breakdown number of players. Essentially, 2 players, as you can see, the scores are different. Usually for our agents, we tend to see that they're worse. In this case, it's actually quite well. And that's the breakdown. Flawed, if you know perfectly how performance is going to play in your MCTS, you can score roughly 4.3 each. Doing a deep dive on this analysis, turns out James actually managed to score perfectly with one of these agents, which is really impressive. And also on Wednesday, I mentioned that my results hadn't been calculating. They have now, so that's the results for the other track. Fairly similar to the learn track, is what we expect to see. This entire data set is 2.8 gigabytes, which is a nightmare over 3G, roughly 120,000 games. And that's all I have to say. So. Cool. Was that 20 or 15?
That was 15.
Perfect. So some time for questions? If anyone has any questions?
So why do you increase the time from 40 milliseconds to 1 second?
So Hanabi is obviously is turn-based and it's not real time. So imposing 40 milliseconds we did because GUGI does it, and why not? But actually it makes sense if we could give them more time because it's a board game, people expect to be able to sit there and think a little bit more. And so if we can give the agents more time, there's more room for interesting strategies to emerge. And also MCTS does better if you give it more time.
So is the human play, usually human takes 1 second for the decision?
Depends on the human.
Okay.
Certain humans will play like really quickly, and other ones we've been sat in the office waiting for half an hour for them to decide whether or not they're going to play their ones. But new players can't say.
Isn't the set available?
So they've said it is currently available, so I can't host it on my service. It's too big, but I want to make it available. I think it's a really good resource, and I will look at it.
Even for play and modeling?
Exactly. So you should yeah.
Okay, something I'm curious about. So clearly in the learning track, you need to figure out how your opponents are playing so you can accurately predict. And then if you're doing the mirror track, then you know exactly about how your teammates are playing because they are the same as you, so you can model it perfectly, I guess.
Yes.
But I guess it'd be interesting to know, like, what the best you could do with a diverse team is? Like if you had perfect models of your teammates.
So perfect models of mixed teams, we've not, as in teams we've made up all different agents, we've not done, it's just what learn track is. If they're all the same strategy, the original paper that set all this in motion, which is our 2017 CEC paper, we actually do publish the, our argument was, what happens if you have these perfect models, and so we give perfect copies of the paired agents to them. The answer is it makes a massive improvement over assuming random play from the opponents, which is what you expect to see in Hanabi. Which
I think it seems to me that the way to maximize score is to have a homogeneous team that knows how each other's playing. I'm wondering if there is potentially an argument for a heterogeneous, like could that possibly be better? Like I'm wondering.
If you have agents that all follow the same strategy, this strategy I mentioned before called hat guessing, where basically the move you're making isn't really like tell you about your ones, it's really an encoding for a slight a mathematical representation of what's going on, and from each of that then the agent can calculate what move they can make. And so you're kind of playing Hanabi, but you're not really doing the modeling stuff. So you can, and that scores really, really well. It scores like 24-ish on average. So there are strategies, if you're all following the same rules, where you can do really, really well, but they're a bit cheating because, like, the moment that you start thinking about, well, is this really like modeling, or are we just like sort of weird hive minders?
Yeah.
So just to add to this point, the thing with Hanabi is that apart from the where you sit on the table, so your starting position in the game is completely symmetrical to all players, so it's kind of hard to see how these specialized roles would emerge, unless it's dependent strongly on the fact that one player is the first player and the other is the second and the other is the third. But I mean, it's possible that there's some combination of mixture strategy. There's a symmetry there that makes it kind of hard to justify not following the same strategy as everyone.
I missed two questions. Okay.
Just a question, I may have missed it. Given the learning track, where
Yes.
you can learn how people play over hundreds of games,
Yep.
how much of a difference does that make in terms of the scoring of the agents compared to just trying to work it out within a given game? How much did it increase the scores by?
I think it actually decreased them slightly, but that's because the number of games you're playing is quite low, and obviously you've had all this offline training that you can do.
So does that suggest then that you don't actually get much benefit from observing how people play with the agents that were submitted?
At the moment, no. Yeah. But next year. Are we good for questions time then? Yep. Cool. Do you know how to sort the lights out, mate?
There may be lights in here, otherwise,
Right.
would you look at that?
Buttons. Cool. Cool. So that's us done. James, do you want to? Yep. Okay. So next up we have James, who is actually this year's and last year's competition winner in every track.
Yes, well. Okay. Good morning. This is work that came out of last year's Hanabi competition, or rather Hanabi competition. I'm not going to cover a lot of the work on the mixed track. This is really focusing on the mirror track. And given enough time, if I can get it to work. I can't.
Is that check it on? Is it on?
Oh. Okay, thank you. Okay, that's better. Right, so I'm not going to explain Hanabi on the basis that Joe's already done that. What I'm going to do is about information set Monte Carlo tree search. I'm afraid it is another Monte Carlo tree search paper. What I'm going to explain is why this just is dreadful in Hanabi, and why it's a particular problem in Hanabi because of the very perverse nature of the hidden information, in as much as you can see everybody else's cards but you can't see your own. Why that occurs, which is because data leaks from what we know into the way we model the other players. How we solve that by re-determinizing regularly during the search. And then the final point is a separate thing, really, which is how we can learn a policy to speed up Monte Carlo search using all of the data in the tree rather than just the root statistics, which tends to be a more common approach. So, sorry, it's the slide. I don't believe there's anyone here who will be at day 3 of CoG and do not know how this works, but just in case someone's arrived this morning. Monte Carlo tree search, a quick recap. It's a search technique which preferentially expands the game tree in the areas that look interesting. Each iteration, we run one game through from the current position at the root all the way down. While we're in the tree, we use statistics in the tree to make balance exploitation and exploration. Then once we're out of the tree, we carry on with some policy, some rollout policy, which could be random or could have domain knowledge. And then we back-propagate the final results to update the tree statistics and add one node each time we do that. Fine. Now, Monte Carlo tree search, all of its theoretical guarantees apply with perfect information. And when you have imperfect information, that does muddy the waters quite a bit. So the information set Monte Carlo tree search has a small but very important adjustment to that, which is that every one of these nodes is now not a game state, but is an information set, which encompasses all of the game states which are indistinguishable to the current player. And I'll explain why in a second. So what we do is, now at each iteration, we have to create a determinization, because we don't actually know what cards we have, so it's very difficult to simulate a game if you don't actually know what happens when you play a card. So to resolve that, we determinize to a possible state we think we could be in. We run through the game exactly the same way, but when we update the statistics and make decisions, we are using the information set statistics that cover all possible games and amalgamate those statistics. So that's information set Monte Carlo tree search, information set and determinization are the two key things. Now, the reason we do that is these two things, actually mostly the first one. So this is a problem in any search algorithm when you have imperfect information. That you have strategy fusion and non-locality. Now, I won't go through in detail. Non-locality is because things that people did or didn't do earlier in the game affect what we think they have in the distribution of states. This doesn't really cover non-locality. What is more important is strategy fusion. And it's where you have naive approaches which you can solve using Monte Carlo tree search particular determinizations and then average over those. And what that is doing is it's making different decisions in the tree based on information that you don't have in some magical fashion. Now, information set Monte Carlo tree search addresses strategy fusion, precisely because we're now munging all the statistics for games at an information state level. It doesn't directly address non-locality, but there are some adaptations that do. This isn't one of them. So, we try it in Hanabi. How's it work? And the answer is, it's pretty awesomely dreadful. The crucial line is this very first one. This is vanilla information set Monte Carlo tree search with no domain-specific knowledge. We are just doing the absolute core algorithm. And we get a score of about 3.9. That's really, really poor. And more distressingly, even as we increase the computational budget to 3 seconds thinking time per move, it stays absolutely static, and we're not getting any leverage at all on the game. We can improve if we add some domain knowledge. So we use two approaches which are quite common in Monte Carlo tree search. We add constraints to the action space with rules. So rather than have the full branching factor of about 32 in a 4-player game, we cut out the moves that no human would ever consider were sane, and we cut that down to about 8 or 9. And that helps. And we can also add in an informed rollout policy. And in this case, VDB is from Vandenberg et al. 2016, which looked at it was a search over various ruled heuristics. And that improves. However, this is quite important, the Vandenberg policy gets 17.2 in sub-millisecond time. And we're now using Monte Carlo tree search for 3 seconds, and it can barely get up to that level. Yeah, this is not looking like it's going to be a productive approach. But why is this so dreadful? And the problem is information leakage. And the easiest way to explain this is to walk through an example. So what we have is we're at the green node, it's our move, and in the tree we're modelling what we think the red player next will do. We know they have a blue 2 as their third card, which is great, because that's now playable. If we can get them to play it, we'll get a point. So you expect we should tell them something about that. But consider what happens when we now model their action using Monte Carlo tree searcher for the red node. The central problem is that every single iteration through the tree, we have determinized, given our absolute perfect knowledge, that they have a blue 2 as their third card. So if they play that third card, they'll score a point. Every time they play that third card. So they will learn to do that. And then it gets worse, because that propagates up the tree. And because we now model them to think, well, they will play that blue 2, therefore I don't need to tell them they've got a blue 2. They will magically do it. This is clearly dreadful, and asymptotically what's happening is that our model of how other players play assumes they know everything that we know. It's a general problem in Monte Carlo tree search. It's not specific to Hanabi, but in most games it doesn't actually have an impact until you get much further down the tree. And what we've got is strategy fusion. Because if you think about it, we are in the solid green circle and we know that's the game state we're in. But when red acts, they could have got to that stage from any number of other possible games. They don't know which game they're playing, even though we do. So if we constantly what we need to do is to model that in the way that the red player will play. And that's what we try and do by re-determinizing. Specifically, sorry, slightly busy slide, we re-determinize not just at the root, but we shuffle the cards effectively every single time we make a move. So what we do is, as we hit the red node, we re-determinize to a state that we think they could be in. And then once they've made their move, we reshuffle back again. So to continue the example, we know they have a blue 2, but if they have no information, we will randomly pick one of those faded green circles, and they might have a yellow 4 or a red 5 in that position. So now, if they choose to play that card, we won't get a point, we'll lose a life, which is a much more realistic simulation of a much more realistic model if we're trying to model their thinking process. It does introduce a further problem though, because we can then, although we can then put the data back again, if they've actually played a yellow 4 that we know they didn't have, how do we carry on with the rest of the game simulation? And what we do is we just shift this alternate reality, we carry on this brand new game that we weren't playing, we know we're not playing, and we carry on. And then we back-propagate that result all the way back through the tree. Theoretically, that's utterly untenable. It just works quite well in practice. So, the results. The green line is just the vanilla implication, say, Monte Carlo tree search. And the solid line is where we are re-determinizing every move. And we can see we are now getting some traction, and it's a very small effect, but it is significant that we finally start to get some improvement as we increase the computational budget. The orange and blue lines are there where we add, first of all, domain knowledge via rule constraints, and then the blue line where we add an informed rollout policy. And this is now looking much more positive because although it doesn't help much by itself, it allows those approaches to get leverage and to dramatically improve the playing strength. And we're now getting well above the 17 baseline that we're starting with from the rollout policy, up to 20 in a 4-player game. So far so good. However, there remains a problem. We only have 40 milliseconds because of the way Joseph decided to design the competition, which isn't going to work very well. It will take him 3 seconds per move. So what we do is, like many people before us, we borrow some ideas from DeepMind and AlphaZero. Specifically, what we do is we train, or we run offline games using Monte Carlo tree search with 10 seconds or 30 seconds a move. And then what we can do is, from those games, we can create a training set where in each game we record the states we've been through, the state, the action that was taken from that state, and then cue the end game value that that leads to. We can then apply some standard supervised learning techniques to learn the function Q, which predicts the end game value if you take action A from state S. And then we can iterate around this cycle. So initially we can do it by self-play, we can just use a random rollout policy, but then on the second iteration we can use Q to define a rollout policy. And we can iterate around until we get convergence to a good policy Q, which takes about 3 iterations. It doesn't improve much or at all beyond that. And then in the competition entry, again, this is copied blatantly from DeepMind. All we do is we do a Monte Carlo tree search, but we don't do the computationally demanding part of doing a full rollout. We just use this function we've learned to Q to value what we think the value of that state is, and then we backpropagate that out the tree. And that's the actual competition entry that was used. However, there's one more subtlety, which I think is potentially novel, is rather than just taking the statistics from the root node of the tree, we actually use all of the tree. So, you know, we have a whole load of information if you've got quite a deep Monte Carlo tree that we've built up during search. So why don't we use that as well when we're training our function Q? And most of the literature just uses that root node statistics. So what we do is for every single node that we've reached a threshold, we can extract the state, all of the actions that were considered, and the value Q that Monte Carlo tree search applied. And then we use that to train. And as you can see in the second table, yeah, if we just use the root nodes, we get a pretty poor policy that gets 10.6. But as we use more of the nodes and become less fussy about how much data there is, although that is more noisy, we do get a dramatic increase in the quality of the playing strength of what we learn from that. Partially, that is because we just got more data, because we're extracting more data, so you'd expect that to be better. But there's also something more important going on, which is that it's more robust data. Because we're taking data out of the tree, not just from the perfect trajectory of play, but from all of the what-if scenarios and the counterfactuals that the tree search looked at and decided was a bad way of playing. But we can take that data and make sure that is included in the function Q. And that's a key result from a lot of imitation learning literature, that if you train just on a perfect trajectory, you get rapid error propagation intuitively, because as soon as the policy finds itself off the perfect path, it doesn't know what to do. And by using this wider set of data, it knows how to cope in that situation. Right. So, to recap, information set Monte Carlo tree search doesn't work well in Hanabi because we get information leakage from what we know into our implicit opponent model in the tree. We can resolve that, at least partially, by using something that theoretically is slightly suspect, by re-determinizing to a different game and then using those during search. And we can get play within 40 milliseconds with iterative training of the evaluation function, where we use the whole of the tree rather than just the root statistics to get a more robust set of play. And I will skip that bit. So thank you for listening.
Okay, got time for questions?
Thank you for a very interesting presentation. Okay, first thing is, do you maintain a single tree for information tree search?
Or one per
Just one tree.
In Hanabi, for particular, this is using open loop search, so we define a state purely by the sequence of actions being taken. So yeah, that is a, and because we do that, it actually makes no difference whether we do a single tree or we have a separate tree per player. Theoretically, you should have a separate tree per player, but, and I think I explained this, if you look in the archive, on the technical report from archive, I'll try and explain why, but specifically, we don't need to do that here, we can use a single tree, but generally speaking, you should have a separate tree per player. Yeah.
Okay, so the second question is, so you're re-determinizing every time the node is visited, so I guess if you use a different determinization, there will be different set of available reactions for that node?
Absolutely, yes. No, you are, yeah, that's true. Because if you redeterminize, it's not when you redeterminize the node, because it's more a matter of how you've determinized your hand, because that's the thing that you can't see, and therefore you don't know what it is, but the others can. But what that does mean is that, and that would apply for information set Monte Carlo tree search as well. So yes, at every node, some actions are not possible, because if you don't have any yellow cards, another player can't say hint yellow.
So then you are maintaining all the pastly available actions and
yeah. So the statistic, it just takes that into account by keeping track of how many times you visited that node that action was actually possible, and then it uses that as a subtle difference.
Sorry, this is a question. So the final parts, I mean, the learning all the using all the nodes in the tree to train the policy. I guess the root node is a relatively high number of the busy counts than others, and you are using when you're using busy counts larger than 10, it dramatically increases your performance. But how do you think about using some weighting?
It's a very it's a very good idea. I did consider it, but I thought that's far too much effort to code up at this point, and it seemed to work quite well. But it's a very good idea. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, sir.
So how your algorithm performs in situations when you give information and you don't want player to play that card, which you like. You don't want the player to discard that particular card, like to keep it. Like how do you deal with these situations when you have like similar color or similar number? One you want to keep and one you don't want to keep.
Nothing is a quick answer. Well, it learns what to do in that situation. So the whole point is there's nothing that says I'm telling you this because I want you to keep it or because I want you to play it to an extent. That's learned within the tree search. So there's no algorithmic changes to that.
So this is the question: how is it performing in these particular scenarios?
Oh, I see. I don't know. I haven't delved into all the bits of play. I mean, it does occasionally do a few more things. It does, as Joe said, sometimes it will discard fives early because it never gets, very rarely gets to a perfect score. So it realises fives I can just discard because I'm not going to be using it. That's one thing I have noted in the play.
All right, I got it.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah. Does the agent seem to take into account the fact that when they are the next player and they don't get any information,
I think that is a key thing possibly for next year, which is exactly this non-locality.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly the point of the fact that somebody did or didn't do something earlier in the game. It gives you can infer stuff. So if you're the second player and the first player tells player 3 something, that probably means you don't tell me once, because they would have told you.
Yeah.
So that would be a very obvious bit of future work to improve the play.
Okay, so that was not in your rule set of 35.
Second?
It's not in the rule set that you define.
No, not at all.
Time for it? Do you mind speaking with the board?
across the ball. It's not. Let me just see if I.
That's it's the wrong one.
Okay. You are using the HDMI. So, hi, I'm Rodrigo. I'm the other competitor in the competition. I'm going to talk about my paper, Diverse Agents for Ad-Hoc Operations in Hanabi. I'm going to start with this problem of ad-hoc operation, which is implied in all that has been said today, which is the problem of cooperating with arbitrary, unknown agents or humans that you've never seen before. And this has kind of imbues the problem of theory of mind or player modeling, which we've already gone over a bit. And this is the main motivation for the mixed and learning track and for Hanabi as a research platform itself. And so theory of mind, it has two aspects to it. One is kind of predicting what the other player will do. So if I have a model that humans typically cross the street when the sign goes green, I can say, oh, when the light becomes green, they will cross. And the other half of the coin is that if I see that they're already crossing the street, then I can say, oh, the light is probably green. And that's the key, what makes Hanabi so interesting, as you might have gleaned from all the examples we see. So in Hanabi, you're always wondering, if I take this action, what will they do? And also, because they did or didn't take that action, what does it say about my hand and about what they want me to do? Okay, so ad-hoc operation is a super interesting problem with all these ties to theory of mind and player modeling. And then my question that motivated this specific paper was, how do we want to evaluate whether it's succeeding at ad-hoc operation? So typically in AI, the most common way to evaluate an agent is by self-play performance. So you put it to play with a copy of itself, and then you know how good an agent is. But in Hanabi, it's not enough. So here we have an example of a paper where they trained 11 different reinforcement learning agents, and they score very well when paired with each other. So on this diagonal, you have like scores like 20, 21, 22, which is very, very good. And they are very, very bad when they pair with anything else. So there are scores there that are as low as 0.07, which is way worse than just taking a random policy. Because they are implicitly learning to rely on a bunch of cues and conventions that the other player doesn't have because it was trained independently. So like just doing self-play performance is not enough to guarantee that they will be good ad-hoc operations in ad-hoc operation. Well, we could evaluate them with humans, and I mean people are doing it, but it's hard, it has a bunch of limitations, you can do it all the time, and then you change your agent, you want to test again, you have to call a bunch of people again. I will refer you to this paper by Marcus Egger, where he has an online platform where you can play Hanabi, and he collected some data and did some analysis. It's cool, but for the competition, we don't have that. We can't play humans, and that's not how the competition works. And in a bunch of realistic scenarios, we will also not have access to that. So the way that we have typically been doing this is like we select a set of test pool agents, and we try to maximize our score when played with any one of them, or with averaging our score across all of them, basically. But this does lead to some interesting questions, like if this particular pool of agents is the one that we should be using. So it leads to questions such as, do these agents represent a reasonable range of the possible strategies that would be possible in Hanabi? And are the strategies that I'm supposed to use with each of them different? So maybe the agents themselves are different, but the best way to play with them is the same. And so what good is it to have a bunch of agents, really? What assumptions should I make about these agents? So am I in advantage in the competition because I read all of Joseph's papers? And the final question is like, is the whole experiment repeatable once you already know the agents? So once you already know the agents, there's no secret anymore, and then I can just go back to the very old strategy of tailoring my strategy against yours. And then it's not a ad-hoc operation anymore. So I was trying to tackle like, so how would I ideally want to train, what is the group of agents that I would ideally want to train my agent again? The agent that I'm actually going to submit to the competition.
And so what we found, what was thinking was, we want to be able to generate, like stochastically, procedurally, a pool of very diverse agents that to serve as our partners, as our sparring partners in Hanabi. And if you read that phrase and you know anything about quality diversity, that's basically the whole point of quality diversity, which is, so quality diversity is a new, a kind of novel, recent family of algorithms that focus both on achieving high quality, and high quality for us here in Hanabi is high scores, and also high diversity. So in terms of behavior, they will display different behaviors. So there's a whole family of new algorithms that are specifically tailored to at once generate a range of good and diverse strategies. And I think, if I can generate that, that might be a good sparring partner for my agent that I will actually submit to the competition. So that was the main motivation of the paper. It's not itself to get the best agent, but to get a good pool of agents to test with. So the algorithm that we chose for this test is Natalie's. And if you know genetic algorithm, it's very simple with one important twist. So we first define the behavior space with respect to a few behavior dimensions, and we discretize it with some granularity. And then you basically apply the genetic algorithm, but keeping an archive of the best solution for each niche. So instead of searching for one good agent, you search for the best you can find in each point of your discretized behavior space. So and then it's the whole genetic algorithm loop that you generate an individual, you measure it, but not with respect to fitness, but also to where it should fall in your behavior dimensions. And then if it's better than your archive, you keep it. If not, you discard it. So we need to define a behavior space. We decided to do two metrics, 2 dimensions on our behavior space. And these are the metrics that we came up with. So the first is communicativeness. Given that you have a hint token to give, and you could give a hint, how often do you actually choose to give a hint? So an agent with full communicativeness will always give hints, even if it's not good to do so, even if their partner already has all the information they need. And an agent with zero communicativeness will never give a hint, and so it can't play Hanabi. And the other one is risk aversion. So does your agent only plays cards that they know already with certainty that are playable, or do they sometimes take risks? So every time you play a card, I'm going to report what's, from your perspective, the probability that that card would be playable, and then I'll average that across all your plays. So with 1, you only play cards that are certain to be playable. With a 0, you only play cards that are certain to be unplayable, which should also not work very well. But that is hopefully a useful range there. And then this is the behavior metrics. The representation of my agents is rule-based agents, so it's a simple sequence of conditions and their corresponding actions, basically. So there's a rule, there's a sequence of rules that have been designed by various authors in the past, including Joseph. And then we represent an agent as a sequence of these rules, an ordered sequence of these rules. So this is an example of the EG agent in this representation. So I created a database of all the rules that I could find, and the EG agent in this representation would be a sequence of rules 2, 8, 13, 27, 38, which corresponds to certain rules. Like I will try to play a card that I know that's playable, then I'll try to inform you of useful stuff, and then I'll try to discard cards that aren't good. So this is an example of an agent with 5 rules. For our actual experiments, we use agents with 15 rules. We divided the behavior dimensions with in 20, so at 0.05 intervals. We evaluated a total of 1 million individuals, and we used like regular mutation and crossover operators. And for the paper, all the results in the paper are reported with respect to the 2-player version of the game. For the competition, I did the experiment for other numbers of players. And this is the type of result that you get with Natalie's. So on the horizontal axis, you have a range of risk aversions. So the agents on that corner only play cards that they know are playable. The agents on this corner only play cards that they know are unplayable. And the agents in the middle, they take some risks to a higher or lower degree. And here is communicativeness. So the agents down here, they will always give hints. The agents down here, up here will never give hints, and the agents in the middle will give hints sometimes. And so as it can be expected by the way that we defined, There's a more useful range to this side here, because you don't want to play cards that you know are bad, and you do want to give hints, like at least somewhat about around 0.5% of the time. But what's interesting here is that the best agent is not, at the bottom right corner. So it's not trivial to just say, oh, if these metrics are good in that range, just maximize them. No, there's a certain sweet spot for these metrics. And this is our best agent that we got in this experiment. It scored 20.5 in self-play with 2 players. And that's better than our previous year entry for 2 players, so that's also cool. Like, we weren't specifically looking for one best agent, but the agent that resulted from this whole experiment was better than our previous best agent for 2 players using the GA approach, not MCTS. Okay, so now we can generate a population of agents. What are other questions that we can ask of this population? And so these are the questions that we tackle on the paper, and that I'll very briefly show the results here. But the main thing for this talk is the idea of using quality diversity as a way to generate like sparring partners for Hanabi. So I asked, like, do these agents play well with each other? Who's the best partner for these agents, and so on. I'll go through them one by one. So, do these agents play well with each other? So I paired all the 400 of them with all the 400. Actually not 400, because the ones that score 0 I treated as invalid, because there was no agent there. But yeah, so of the valid ones, I paired them all, and then I got these type of results. So you see that the agents that are good with playing with the other agents in this pool are mostly the same with that are good in self-play, but there are some anomalies there, which I have some theories as why that may be the case, but I can't explain them here. If you're curious, you can ask later. And notably, the average score of all these pairings is lower than self-play. So the agents in general do benefit from playing with similar strategies. Who's the best partner for each of these agents? If I know that, and I can identify what niche you occupy, I could in theory choose the appropriate strategy. And so once again, you see that the best partners seem to be condensed in the high scoring self-play region, but there's an anomaly there that, again, I have some theories. So are these agents' chromosomes representation diverse? We measure that by Hamming distance, and we see that neighboring agents, they share like about 5 chromosomes of the 15, but once you, what I mean by neighboring is in the behavior map, two of these cells that are side by side. They share around 5 chromosomes, but once you go farther than that, they basically share no chromosomes at all. But you could say, oh, maybe they have different chromosome representations, but they still take the same moves. So we measure that as well. And so that's like how often, on a sample of 148,000 game states, how often they take the same action as each one as a function of their distance in the behavior map. So once again, like if you're 0 distance from yourself, if you're a self, you always take the same action as yourself. But as you go down the map, then you start to take more and more different actions from your farther neighbors. And finally, this is a very important question for us. If I repeat the experiment, will I get the same agents and agents that do the same thing? So we measure that by their self-play score. So by repeating the experiment, we get 3 or 4 different behavior maps, and then we compare the agents on each cell. So we put the agents on each cell to play with each other. We get a score that's very close to their self-play, so maybe they're the same agents. But we get very different chromosomes and very different and quite reasonable action diversity. So they take the same actions only slightly more than half the time. So that means that even if I run this experiment once, and you've seen all my 400 agents, and then I run it again, and I give you the behavior niche, you can still predict exactly what it's going to do, which makes them very good, as I'm saying, sparring partners, because then you can perfectly tailor your strategy, even if you know like how my black box works and which niche it occupies. Finally, just to wrap up, this is the actual competition agents that we use. So for the mirror track, we just took the best self-play. And for the mix and learning track, I tried to implement that strategy that I said that now I measure what's your communicativeness and risk aversion. And I had previously pre-computed what agent plays best with the agents on each of those niches. And then I pick the counter strategy. Well, there are some limitations. This is perfect yet because this calculation is kind of hard to do within game, and I didn't have time to fully flesh it out. Even with, so this calculation is not, it is a bit inaccurate, but even with that, it worked really relatively well with 2 and 5 players, so I submitted the version that was doing this. And for 3 and 4 players, where I was getting bad results, I just submitted the agent that scored the best across the average of all the 400 agents. So these are the actual competition entries that are not in the paper. This is later work from the paper, but since we're here. And so takeaways is that I propose these behavior metrics as ways to enforce diversity in Hanabi players. The rule-based agents seem to perform better in the medium range of communicativeness and high but not extreme range of risk aversion. My best agent that I got from this whole experiment in self-play was better than previous year. And they exhibit reasonable diversity even if you know their niches across different runs. Thank you.
Have you compared how much better an agent trained against this diverse set of other agents is compared to an agent that would train against other agent that would meet sometimes its own type of play and randomness? And what is the benefit of having agents that have a given specific different strategy towards agent that play sometimes like us and sometimes the way we don't understand because it's random?
No, I haven't thought about it. So I mean, when in the pool of agents that Joseph uses for the competition, there's an agent that's designed to be tricky. So it does a bunch of unexpected plays unless it's not random. There's a logic to it, but it's unless you exactly know how it operates, it makes some very bad plays. And it's interesting to see like what's the best way to play with these kinds of deceptive agents. But here I'm not doing that. So on each cell I'm searching for the best agent I can. It's basically a philosophical position that no one plays bad on purpose. But I mean, it's a separate problem, and we could try to incorporate this as a, for example, we could add a third behavior dimension that is how often the probability that it will take a random play. And then you repeat the experiment and you can play against these agents as well. So the framework supports that. We haven't done this side of it in Korea at all.
An idea that occurs to me for the learning track is to train this behavior archive in advance, and then during the learning phase, you're just basically sampling to kind of find out what kind of agents interact best with certain tags. Like who from your archive, if you see that your teammates are the labels A, C, and F, like which one from your archive should you pick for that set of teammates?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm not updating who the agent I should work with, I should choose, is on runtime. Like I'm trusting my archive, but this is I could try to keep track of this also during gameplay and improve my estimation of who's the best partner is.
Right. I'm just thinking of a way to use that.
Yeah, there's definitely some interest in there. Yeah, very good suggestion.
One more question.